Hi everyone. So for today's lesson, it's going to be slightly different. What I would like you guys to do, like you should be doing every day, is make sure you are going back to your work and make sure that you are checking it and making corrections on it. Because if you're doing something incorrectly, you need to make sure that we're looking at why we were doing that incorrectly and try to learn from those mistakes. As always, when you check these answer keys, send me a message, send me an email if you are unsure of why I got a certain answer and you got something different. So go back to yesterday's lesson, take that worksheet out, and I would go back and correct them. These 3 examples we did together, so those should be fine, but I would correct these 6 examples. When you are done, then you should be downloading today's lesson. Now, for today, what we're going to do is we're going to not do new problems. We're going to work on these new problems, but we're just going to add on to it. So for today, we are going to write equations for these trig graphs. So let's take a look at this first example. For this first example, I identified my midline, my amplitude, my period, and my frequency. If I am writing an equation, my equation should be in the general form of one of these two. And I'm just going to write them over here so you could see it. So I have y equals a sine of bx plus d. And y equals a cosine of bx plus d. So there's a few parts to this, and I just want to annotate all of it, and then it will be very simple to just take what we have as the important information and plug it into here. So A is my amplitude, B is my frequency, and D is my shift. So if I look at my notes on what we did yesterday from lesson 10-15, we have our amplitude, we have our midline, which is our shift, and I have my frequency. So if you have those 3 pieces, this A, B, and D value, you could write your equation. So let's look at example 1. Again, is an equation. So if something is an equation, you need to start with a y equals. If you don't have the y equals, it is technically not an equation. So y equals, I need to start with finding out, is this a sine or a cosine graph? So this graph, because it starts at its maximum, this is a cosine graph. So I will be writing this equation. So y equals, my a value is my amplitude. So on example 1, my amplitude is 1. So I'm going to put a 1 here. Then I'm going to write cosine because it's a cosine graph. And then I need to fill in my B value. Your B value is your frequency. So let's look at yesterday's example. My B value was 1/3. So I'm going to put the 1/3 there, and that's what goes with the X. And the last part is my D value, which is my shift. Since my midline here was at -4, I know that this graph shifts up 4 units. So whatever that midline is, I'm going to put plus or minus, if it was going down, a +4 because it shifted up 4 units. And that is my equation of that function. So that's all we're going to do today. We're not going to pull new information. You should have checked these and corrected them. And now we're going to write the correct equations for them. So let's take a look at the second example. So our second example, this is a sine function. So I'm now looking at this top one. Again, start with y equals. Our a value is our amplitude. So look at the example 2, find the amplitude. We found that the amplitude was 3. It's a sine function, so I'm going to write sine. My b value in this case I found was 1, so you can put a 1x, but I will also show you how else you could write that. And then our shift, this midline was at y equals -1. So your d value is your shift, so I'm going to do -1. All right, I'm going to try one more of these with you. Again, first figure out, is it a sine or a cosine graph? This is a cosine graph. So I'm now writing this equation, the bottom one. So it's a cosine graph, so I need to start out with a y equals. My amplitude in this one, I had that my amplitude for example 3 was also 3, is a cosine, so I'm going to write cosine. My b value is what goes with my x, so I found that my b value was 2. That goes with my x. And now, since this is shifted up 1, or my midline is 1, I'm going to write a plus 1. So what your job for today is, you should have checked these 6 questions, checked your midline, amplitude, period, and frequency, and now you're going to write the equations based on that right information. What you're going to submit is just this notes page for page lesson 10-16 with the correct 6 equations on here.